Welcome to the Way Out Recovery Hour. This is Bob Sharits. If you just joining KHTS AM 1220 for the day, you have picked a good time to come on. We have in studio with us today Detective Bill Velek from the Sheriff's Department. Pretty sort of non-eventful weekend, at least in the news, and as far as drugs and alcohol are concerned, which is always a good thing. But the Way Out Recovery Hour is brought to you by KHTS and The Way Out, which is a brand new treatment center in town. We provide outpatient treatment for both adolescents and adults. We are at 661-296-4444, and we are also at thewayoutrrecoveryscv.com. So, there's been a lot of sort of talk about drugs as if there isn't all the time, but a couple of weeks ago there was a run of overdoses over a weekend, a significant number. There's always a significant number, but it happened all at once, and there was a lot of talk about it. Kind of raised a new conversation again. Unfortunately, there's tragedy that has to take place. It doesn't have to, but it takes place sometimes in order for us to get talking about it again. But that's certainly not the case in your department, right?
True. We stay on this topic all the time. I've been working with the Juvenile intervention team, with our focus being on heroin use, overdoses, education, all that since late 2010, and we haven't stopped, and the team's been in existence since.
And you specifically mentioned, heroin, and I'm sure you're talking about other opiates as well, but specifically heroin, because of the tremendous rise in the use of opiates and the use of heroin, certainly before 2010, but in the last decade.
Yes, it's been on a rise nationwide. It's not just here in Santa Clarita. It's been on the rise across the country, with heroin, other opiates, prescriptions. And in 2010, we really felt it here in Santa Clarita. The city and community members came to the Sheriff's Department and asked what we could do to help. So right. In response, the Sheriff's Department came up with the Juvenile Intervention Team, or the J Team, and to try and stem the growth of drug use from a young age, so that we could stop the use of it before it gets into something bad. And we'd follow through with all the heroin. We'd start with young drug offenders, marijuana, wax, all those different things, and continue all the way through the transitional years into adulthood, and work with the families and the young drug users and offenders.
Well, and the reason I mention, point out that you said specifically heroin is I don't want anyone out there thinking that that's. So what's happened is, because heroin is in the news, and the city has done events, even one called Heroin Kills, right? A couple of years in a row, pills kill, things like that. There's a lot of focus on opiates, a lot of focus on heroin, but make no mistake about it, other drugs are still running rampant out there.
Yeah, there's always other drugs out there. Heroin seems to get the community's attention. Because of the overdoses, right. So it's a good jumping off point for us to get people's attention, and then get them in the room and get them in the conversation. And once we have their attention, we can really pinpoint the conversation where it needs to be, which is just drug use in general, any and all mind-altering chemicals.
A conversation that seems to come up for me a lot is people will come in and they talk about heroin, they talk about methamphetamine, they talk about the so-called harder drugs, and they tend to minimize things like alcohol, for instance. And what's interesting about that is I think it's important for people to understand that by far the most dangerous drug out there is alcohol, numbers-wise. Numbers-wise, in terms of numbers, death, and things like that. And so when we talk about a specific drug like heroin, don't let it overshadow the fact that all of these other drugs are very dangerous as well.
And that's why the response that we had was with the juvenile intervention,
right.
Where we don't see a lot of juvenile heroin use or juvenile opiate use, but that's just where the use of any drug starts, is in our youth. In that, unfortunately, 14, 15 years old, when they're beginning in high school, is when they're first introduced to it through parties, through peer pressures, through really understanding what's happening in their own families sometimes. The drug use sometimes is in the household, and that's when the kids are really starting to understand what it is they're seeing and what they're exposed to. So by educating them early and getting them away from it at an early age, we can cause a long-term effect rather than just addressing just the issue once they become an addict.
Yeah, and substance use disorders and drug use, alcohol use, as a problem, you sort of have to attack it from multiple different angles. And so a prevention effort is certainly the most effective. Early prevention is the early intervention is the best prevention. The earlier you can start talking to a kid, because studies show that most drug use starts between the ages of 12 and 17. And so you have teenagers out there, and most of them, if I go to a kid who's using cannabis today and I tell him this is a gateway drug, and if you keep using it, you're more likely to use things like heroin and stuff like that, the response from the kid most of the time is going to be something like, that's never going to happen to me.
We hear that a lot. When we talk about how we approach it with the sheriff's department here in Santa Clarita, we have what we call our three-prong approach.
Okay.
Education, intervention, and enforcement.
Right.
The enforcement side is obvious with the law enforcement. That's what we do. We make arrests when people are in violation of the law. But the first two pieces that we do, the education and the intervention. Not only educating the kids, but educating the community and the families, the parents. Parents that may not have grown up around or near any drugs and don't know what it is they're looking at. We go out and we'll teach PTAs, PACs. I'll talk to school counselors, different the school supervisors, really service organizations, any group of parents that will listen to me and have me in. I'll talk about what drugs are out there and what the paraphernalias are and what things they need to look for so that they can recognize it. Because if you haven't grown up around it, a lot of times they don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
And the signs are right there in front of them. They just don't know what it is. So educating the community and parents and grandparents is really the first step in what we do in making sure that the community knows what it is they're looking at so that they can make a difference.
Right, and one of the messages is to parents and grandparents, and especially, there used to be this idea, and I think there still is, but it's kind of changing. There used to be this idea that happens elsewhere. That it's not happening here. That look how good we're doing out here. We're an awesome town for, and I think people understand that this sort of new face of addiction, if you will, is happening in every home. It's happening it doesn't matter what your demographic is. It doesn't matter how much money or not you have. And so educating someone who wouldn't otherwise know on things like, if you find crumbled up tinfoil, or if your tinfoil is missing, what could this possibly be? Signs of heroin use, or Q-tips with one end missing,
yes.
Things like that, right? And so you bring out I've seen your trunk of paraphernalia is growing, right?
Yes, I do have some toys out there.
And that's all stuff that you've confiscated from arrests and
yeah, it's all been from local stuff that we found out here. It's all of it's been found here in Santa Clarita. Some of it's stuff that parents have brought in and said, I don't know what this is. I know my kid shouldn't have it.
Right.
Because they don't know what it's used for, and they show up at the station with it, just asking for guidance, which is what we do. And we hope that families and parents are open enough to come and ask the questions, because our goal isn't to prosecute or get anybody in trouble. It's to stop the behavior so that we can have a healthy community, so these kids have a chance to grow up and follow their dreams and do the things that they want to do.
Now, I really have to commend you personally, but certainly the Sheriff's Department and the whole outlook on the way that law enforcement views drug use today. I think that's changed a whole bunch over maybe the last, certainly 10 years, but maybe the last 20 years or so, because in the symptomology of drug use and drug addiction and everything that goes along with it, you guys have seen some very ugly stuff, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, there's
some of the drugs out there, some of the things they do, especially the long-term use, how it physically affects somebody, how it mentally affects them, how it changes their relationships and their families. You see whole households and whole family units just destroyed because of the drug use.
Right.
And it's just one user that's choosing to use, and isn't getting the help that they need destroys the entire family.
And there's things like theft going on. There's violence that's involved in oftentimes with drug use. There's sales of drugs. There's abandonment of children. There's domestic violence. There's on and on and on and on.
We've seen all of that,
right.
Unfortunately.
And so, if you're involved in that, you probably pretty easy to get an idea in your head that, that this is a horrible thing, which it is, but it might have been at one time a little difficult to have any kind of maybe even sympathy or empathy or compassion towards somebody who's involved in that whole drug scene.
It could be, but we also see the drug users that are just hiding it. They're maybe living at home. They're functional addicts where they are doing the things outwardly that they're supposed to do. They're showing up places they're supposed to be. They may even hold down jobs sometimes, but they're still addicts and they're still sick and they're just destroying themselves. And it's hidden from the community. And reaching out to the families and letting them know that they're not alone with it, that it is still a bad addiction. It doesn't have to get to the violence and all these other crimes. We can stop it before it gets there.
Yeah.
Because those are usually when it gets to the extreme. If we can reach out to the families and the addicts before they get to that point, we can stop it and we can turn it around. And that's what we want to do, is help families and help the addicts do that.
Well, it certainly is a beautiful thing. And I think I really see the community looking at law enforcement in a whole different light these days in terms of helping. Because in the drug world, whether you're using, dealing, whatever, there's this sort of we don't talk to police attitude, right? And there's this sort of like, you stay away from them. You don't call 911. You don't have them come over to your house. At least it used to be. And what I've watched happen is that the people, because of the education and because of you guys in the community, what I've watched is people's attitude towards involving law enforcement totally change.
Oh, absolutely. I think we get a lot more phone calls than we used to. With the support of the city and the school districts helping us implement these programs, and helping us reach out to different folks, especially the kids that we get to at a younger age. Now that I've been doing this for 7 years now, some of the addicts that I run into that are in their mid-20s remember me from when they were in high school.
Right.
So they are willing to talk to us. And it's just some of those long-term relationships that we've been able to build with the community. Or even some of the addicts that have gotten clean and are now working with a new person that they're trying to help through their sponsors, through whether it be NA or whatever program they're in. They are able to tell people that they can trust us. And we get phone calls from people that say, "Oh, you helped so-and-so, I need help. Can I talk to you?" And we'll help them, navigate through whatever it is they need to get through, whether it be through the criminal justice system because they got in trouble, or whether they need to find a place to seek treatment, and we can help them find the treatment that best suits them.
Well, and it's cool. There's kind of a little balance between, because there's been times when I've reached out to you guys and said, "Hey, can you go visit so-and-so and give them a little nudge, to try to help them get into treatment." And so there's a cool balance that takes place between having that rapport with the community and also being able to say, "Hey, if you don't stop, then that other of the three-prong, that enforcement part, like we're going to implement that really soon here too,
Yeah, and I think they understand that piece is there. Right. But for most of the addicts that we deal with and the families, they just want help. And if that means they're willing to go through the legal system and deal with what they've got to deal with in order to stop using. Because for the most part, most of the ones that reach out to us, they truly want to stop and they're looking for guidance. Family members are looking for ways to understand what it is they're going through, and how do I recognize these things? How do I find it? How do I help my family members stop? So just helping them get to somebody that can actually guide them better than we can. We can just point them in the right direction.
Well, there certainly is a team effort in the Santa Clarita Valley regarding treatment centers, law enforcement, school districts, city, and other organizations. And we do talk to each other all the time. And it's really nice to have that, because I don't know the laws 100%. You guys know them way better than I do. So I can call you guys for guidance back and forth. And you can call us, the addiction professionals, and we can go back and forth on what's the best help for somebody. On my drive over here today, my friend called me. He also grew up here in Santa Clarita, just like myself, and we were both caught up in drugs when we were teenagers. And he said to me, "Hey, who's on your show today?" And I told him the sheriff's department. He goes, "Isn't it cool that we're all on the same team now?" I said, yeah, that's big changes, right? Is that we are all in the same team, and the team is to try to help people so that they don't have to pick up the drugs, so that they don't have to get to a point where there's no other choice for you guys but to enforce penalties.
Yes.
So I think the J team was one of the wonderful things, along with the Defiant program, along with working with the school district, along with several other programs that sort of came together at the same time when Captain Paul Becker was in the sheriff's department here locally, and Chrissy McAfee, you know who she is,
Yeah.
right? She lost her son Trey and came to a city council meeting, and at that city council meeting, Bob Keller was there, and also Frank Ferry was there, and some other people, and said, hey, you know, my son has died and I want to make a stance on that. What can we do? Kathy Hunter, who's Director of Student Services at the Hart District, and Captain Paul Becker and the City Council, and everybody came together at the same time, along with Chrissy and other parents and loved ones who had lost people, and kind of started talking about, okay, what can we really do to help these people? And the J Team was founded around that same time, correct?
Yeah, we were a result of that meeting. As far as what the sheriff's department can do and the resources we can put at it, the city obviously has done their things with the symposiums they put together for community education. The school district, eventually we got the Defiant program
Right.
put in place in our schools for a peer-led, drug-free educational program for our kids. So everybody kind of came together and got their piece, and the sheriff's department piece of that is the J Team. So I've been on it since we started in 2010, and we just keep plugging along. I don't think it's going to be anything that we go away from soon. Drugs have been in every society since the beginning of time. I think it's going to be a battle that we constantly try and go through. So with the J Team and us being involved, we can help educate families, the community, and everyone about what we're actually seeing in our communities, because we go out on a regular basis and see what's in the community and what bad things the drugs are doing, and we can bring that knowledge out to the community. And through the J Team, we're given the opportunity to share that knowledge and the information with the community pretty openly.
And so what sort of organizations or who calls you guys to come out and do those educational presentations?
I have different church organizations will call, and I'll do stuff for different church groups. A lot of PTAs or PAC clubs from the schools. The different schools will call to do education of their staff, whether it be administrative staff, so the administrators at some of the junior high schools and their campus supervisors know what to look for. At the high schools, the campus supervisors, assistant principals, all that kind of stuff. They have me come out, educate them. I do stuff pretty regularly. Some of the service organizations, Lions Clubs, Elks Lodge, those types of organizations will have me come out so that their members know what it is. But I'll go to any group of parents. I've done just neighborhood groups where a parent finds out their child's doing something and they just get a group of parents together of all their friends. Say, my son's got caught doing it, so your kids are probably doing it too. Let's educate ourselves. And I'll just go do something in somebody's living room and bring the paraphernalia out and talk to 10 groups of parents that just want to know what's going on because all their kids hang out and one of them was experimenting with marijuana or pills or something.
So a couple of different ways that people can get in touch with you regarding if somebody wants that specifically, a educational presentation or something, how do they go about doing that?
If they just called the sheriff station and asked to speak to somebody on the J Team, it would usually comes to myself or somebody on my team. If we're not in the office, leave a voicemail and we'll get back to you.
Okay.
It's usually probably the easiest way for those type of events where we want to go out and do something. The media stuff, we have our PIO, Shirley Miller. She helps organize some of the stuff. If it's a bigger event, we're doing something large, she would be involved with that. But it's usually just call the station, ask for the J Team, and it'll go to one of our desks.
255-1121.
Yes, sir.
Correct. I got to know that number. We have it posted on stuff. It's nice to know that number. It's an easy number to remember. But if you guys want the sheriff's department to come out do an educational presentation, again, call 255-1121. Ask for the juvenile intervention team. And I'm going to ask you again regarding another issue as we come back on the air. We're going to take a break right now. However, like if somebody has if they know there's a drug house next door, or they have a problem with somebody, something like that. There are other avenues for something like that, or same number, try to get a hold of you.
I would say Crime Stoppers.
Okay.
It's a web-based thing, and there's a phone number. When we come back, I'll have the website for you because I always forget what the specific website is for Crime Stoppers. And those come through, and all of our different teams, depending on what the crime is, it gets split up to all of us. So any of them regarding drugs will come to my team, and also our station narcotics team will get it, and we do follow up on all of those.
Everything gets followed up on it on that
Everything gets
website.
followed up on, yeah.
That's what I heard. All right, this is the Way Out Recovery Hour. We will be right back after this.